these big step changes in civilization. So obviously you've got things like, say, the Gutenberg press.
For decades, building a permanent base on the moon was considered impossible. The problem wasn't just landing humans safely. The moon has no air, surface dust is razor sharp, and radiation from the sun will fry electronics and people alike. Every previous plan, from Apollo habitats to NASA's Artemis modules, required dozens of launches to send pre-built buildings and heavy construction gear. Experts said no one could make a sustainable, expandable lunar base without spending hundreds of billions and decades of work. Then SpaceX proposed a radical idea. Use Starship rockets themselves as the habitats. Just land them, and suddenly you have living space. This is that story. Nobody thought this could work because the numbers didn't add up. A Starship weighs about 120 tons empty. When it is loaded with fuel, it weighs 1.2 million kilograms. To put that in perspective, that is as heavy as about 800 large cars. Landing that much weight on the moon and keeping the ship in one piece seemed like a dream. Rockets usually break into pieces when they land if everything is not perfect. The engines are built to push the rocket up, not to make a house for people to live in. Past attempts with the Apollo modules and Russia's moon landers showed humans could barely fit in small tin cans. Even the current NASA plan, called Artemis, needed 30 different rocket launches just to get one small living room and some tools to the surface. Experts said Starship was too big and too weak. They said the moon's surface was too bumpy. They worried the dust would blow everywhere and ruin the machines. They worried the space rays would melt the computers. Every fact pointed to the same answer: you cannot turn a rocket into a home. The biggest hurdle was the weight of the stuff needed to keep people alive. In space, you have to bring your own air and your own water. You also need thick walls to block the sun's rays. In the past, engineers tried to build these walls on Earth and launch them, but every pound you launch costs a lot of money. To get 1 pound of building material to the moon, you need many pounds of fuel. This is called the rocket equation. It means your rocket has to be mostly fuel, which leaves very little room for the actual house. For 50 years, this was the wall no one could climb. If you made the house big enough for people to live in for a long time, the rocket became too heavy to get off the ground. If you made the rocket bigger, you needed more fuel, which made it even heavier. This cycle of adding weight and fuel made the cost go up until it hit billions of dollars for just a few days of living space. NASA's space shuttle tried to be reusable to fix this, but it still cost $1.5 billion for every single flight. It also threw away its big fuel tank every time. The industry became stuck in a pattern where space was a place you visit, not a place you stay. The experts knew that the moon's environment would destroy standard equipment. The dust on the moon is not like the dust in your house. It is made of tiny pieces of glass and rock. Because there is no wind or water on the moon to smooth it out, every grain is sharp. This dust gets into every joint and seal. It eats through spacesuits and clogs up air filters. During the Apollo missions, the dust even made the astronauts' throats sore. If you wanted to live there, you needed a way to keep the dust out for months or years. Traditional designs tried to solve this with airlocks and brushes, but the seals always leaked eventually. The cost to fix these leaks in space was too high. Because of these technical limits, the dream of a moon base stayed on the shelf. No one wanted to risk the money or the lives on a plan that seemed destined to fail. The consensus was that we were decades away from having the technology to survive the lunar night, which lasts for 2 weeks of freezing darkness. Here's how they actually did it. The breakthrough came when SpaceX stopped trying to build a house that fits inside a rocket and decided the rocket was the house. This changed everything. The key innovation was the size and material of the Starship itself. Instead of using thin aluminum like old rockets, they used 304L stainless steel. This steel is strong and can handle both extreme heat and extreme cold without getting brittle. Because they built the ship so large, it has 1,000 cubic meters of space inside. That is about the same amount of space as a large 5-bedroom house. This gave them enough room to pack everything needed for a long stay. They didn't have to worry about tiny capsules anymore. They had the volume to carry heavy shielding and large water tanks. This solved the weight problem because the rocket was already going to the moon anyway. By using the body of the ship as the walls of the base, they removed the need for 30 extra launches. The technical secret that made this work is called the Environmental Control and Life Support System, or ECLSS. This is the machine that cleans the air and recycles the water. On the International Space Station, these systems are very small and break often. SpaceX built a much larger version for Starship. Because they had so much room, they could use bigger, more reliable parts. They designed it to be a closed loop. This means the water you use for a shower is cleaned and turned back into drinking water. The carbon dioxide people breathe out is scrubbed from the air and turned back into oxygen. This mastery of life support meant a crew could live on the moon for a year without needing a refill from Earth. This made the base sustainable for the first time in history. Another major breakthrough was the Raptor engine. To land a giant ship on the moon, you need to be able to control the power very carefully. Raptor engines use methane and liquid oxygen as fuel. Methane is basically natural gas, like what you might use in a kitchen stove. These engines can change their power smoothly, kind of like how you can press the gas pedal in your car a little or a lot. They go from 40% power to 100% power. Older rocket engines are often like an on-off switch. They are either at full blast or they are off. This matters because when you are trying to land a 120-ton ship on a bumpy moon surface, you need to make small adjustments to stay balanced. It is like trying to balance a broomstick on your finger while walking. SpaceX perfected the software that tells the engines exactly how much to push to keep the ship upright. This turned a suicidal landing into a routine procedure. To solve the radiation problem, they used a very simple but smart trick. Instead of bringing heavy lead shields from Earth, they used what was already on the moon. Once the Starship lands, they use an internal crane to move lunar dirt, which is also called regolith. They pile this dirt on top of the ship's landing legs and around the lower sections. A few feet of moon dirt provides as much protection as a thick lead wall. This keeps the astronauts safe from solar flares and space rays. By using local materials, they saved billions of dollars in launch costs. This strategic intelligence allowed them to build a base that is better than anything NASA had planned, but for a fraction of the cost. They proved that the impossible parts of the moon were actually resources if you knew how to use them. The victory is clear when you look at the numbers. One launch of NASA's SLS rocket costs $4.1 billion. That is enough money to buy 100,000 new cars. For that price, the SLS can only fly once and it can't even land. It just drops a small capsule into the ocean. In comparison, a Starship launch is expected to cost about $10 million once it is flying often. That means, for the price of one NASA launch, SpaceX could launch Starship 410 times. This gap in cost is why SpaceX is winning the market. They are not just better, they are hundreds of times cheaper. While Boeing's Starliner has struggled with software errors and failed to carry a crew for years, SpaceX's Crew Dragon has already finished 6 successful missions to the space station. Boeing received $4.2 billion from the government for their ship, yet they are still behind. SpaceX did more with less money because they used a better system. Competitive metrics show that SpaceX has taken over the industry. They now launch more rockets than every other country and company in the world combined. Last year, they flew over 90 times. That is almost twice a week, every single week. Their closest competitors, like Blue Origin, have not even reached orbit with a large rocket yet. While others were writing papers about why landing rockets was too hard, SpaceX was doing it. They have now landed their rockets over 200 times. This success has forced NASA to change its plans. NASA now relies on Starship to be the lander for the Artemis missions. They realized that their own rocket, the SLS, was too expensive and too slow to build a real base. The government had to choose between a system that works and a system that just costs money. They chose Starship. This shift happened because of a difference in how the companies are run. At legacy companies, the goal is often to keep the government contract going as long as possible. They use a system called cost-plus contracts. This means the government pays for all the costs and then gives the company a guaranteed profit on top. If the company takes longer or spends more, they actually make more money. This encourages them to be slow. SpaceX uses fixed-price contracts. The government tells them what they want and gives them a set amount of money. If SpaceX spends more, they lose money. If they work fast, they keep the profit. This resource protection and focus on efficiency is why SpaceX can build a moon base for the price of a NASA airplane. It is a competence hierarchy where the best ideas win, not the oldest companies. The consequences of this breakthrough are huge for the world. Right now, there is a new space race. China says they will land people on the moon by 2030. They have been very good at hitting their deadlines. Their space station was built on time. Their moon robots landed on time. Originally, the United States was going to beat them by 4 years, but because of delays with old-fashioned rockets and the Starliner issues, that lead is shrinking. If the US had stayed with the old way of doing things, China might have won. But because Starship is moving so fast, the US has a chance to stay ahead. The ability to launch 100 tons of SpaceX has taken over the industry. We can build a base before China even lands their first astronaut. This is not just about pride, it is about who gets to set the rules for the moon. The transition from a visited moon to a lived-on moon is happening now. Engineers knew that the old way was a dead end. They knew that throwing away rockets was like throwing away a 747 jet after one flight across the ocean. No one could afford to run an airline that way, and no one can afford a space program that way. By making the rocket reusable and turning it into the house itself, SpaceX solved the math problem that stopped us for 50 years. They took the technical mastery of the Raptor engine and the simple strength of stainless steel to create a platform that no one else can match. The results are visible at their launch site in Texas. You can see dozens of these giant ships being built at once. It is not a science experiment anymore. It is a factory. This system also proves that we can live on other worlds. The life support systems being tested for the moon base are the same ones we will need for Mars. If you can recycle water and air for a year on the moon, you can do it on a trip to the red planet. The Starship is designed to use the same fuel on Mars that it uses on Earth. This is strategic intelligence at work. Every step they take on the moon is a practice run for the next big leap. The experts who said this was impossible are now the ones watching it happen. They are seeing that the limits they believed in were just problems waiting for a better solution. The focus on mastery and the refusal to accept no for an answer has changed the future of the human race. The financial forensics show that the old way of doing space was mostly about spreading your tax dollars across many different states to keep politicians happy. This is why the SLS parts are built in so many different places. It makes the rocket more expensive and harder to build, but it keeps the money flowing. SpaceX does the opposite. They build almost everything in one place. They make their own engines, their own tanks, and their own software. This vertical integration means they don't have to wait for 100 different suppliers. If a part isn't working, they can change the design in a single day. This speed is why they can fly twice a week while others fly twice a year. It is a system built for success, not for politics. When you look at the competitive scoreboard, the gap is only getting wider. SpaceX is already working on the next version of Starship that will be even larger. It will be able to carry 200 tons to orbit. That is like carrying 130 cars in a single flight. No other rocket in history has even come close to that. The current most powerful rocket in the world, the Falcon Heavy, is also made by SpaceX. They are competing against themselves because no one else is in the same league. This is what happens when a company focuses on technical mastery instead of just following old rules. They create a new reality where the impossible becomes the routine. The pattern recognition here is simple to see. In every industry, there comes a time when a new way of doing things makes the old way look silly. It happened with cars and horses. It happened with computers computers and typewriters. Now it is happening with rockets. The era of the disposable rocket is over. The era of the small, cramped capsule is over. We are entering the time of the spaceliner. These are ships that can carry 100 people at once. They are ships that can land, refuel, and take off again the next day. This is the transformation that everyone said couldn't be done. But by using the rocket as the home, SpaceX found the shortcut that everyone else missed. Justice comes in the form of results. For years, people were told that space was too expensive to do anything meaningful. They were told that we had to choose between fixing things on Earth and going to the moon. But when you drop the cost by 99%, you don't have to choose anymore. You can do both. The money being saved by using Starship instead of the SLS can be used for other things. It can be used for more science, better telescopes, or even programs on the ground. The efficiency of the private sector has provided a way to explore the stars without breaking the bank. This is the ultimate victory for the engineers who believed there was a better way. The strategic intelligence of the Starship design is also seen in its fuel choice. Most old rockets used hydrogen. Hydrogen is very powerful, but it is very hard to work with. It is the smallest molecule, so it leaks out of everything. It also has to be kept extremely cold. Methane is much easier. It can be kept at temperatures that are easier to manage. It is also more dense, which means you can use smaller tanks. Most importantly, you can make methane on the moon or Mars using the dirt and the small amount of ice found there. This means the rockets can live off the land. They don't have to bring all their return fuel from Earth. This is like being able to find a gas station in the middle of the desert. It makes long-term survival possible. The human decisions behind this were also key. SpaceX hired young engineers who were hungry to solve hard problems. They gave them the freedom to fail and try again. This is why you see so many SpaceX rockets blow up during testing. They are not mistakes, they are lessons. While NASA spent 10 years making sure the SLS was perfect before the first flight, SpaceX built and tested 20 versions of Starship. They found the weak spots by breaking things on purpose. This fail-fast method is how you achieve a breakthrough. It is how you move from "it might work" to "it works every time." By the time a crew steps onto a Starship to go to the moon, that ship design will have flown hundreds of times. It will be the safest ship ever built because it has been tested more than any other. The competence hierarchy at SpaceX ensures that the best solutions are used. If an engineer finds a way to make a part lighter or cheaper, they can change it immediately. There is no long board of directors to ask for permission. This allows them to stay ahead of the competition. While Boeing is stuck in meetings, SpaceX is on the launch pad. This culture of action is what made the impossible lunar base a reality. They didn't just talk about it, they built the factory to make it happen. They turned a dream into a production line. This is the mark of a system that has mastered its craft. As we look at the timeline, the next few years will be the most exciting in history. We will see the first Starship land on the moon without people to prove it is safe. Then we will see the first crewed landing. After that, we will see the ships being tilted and covered in dirt to create the first permanent buildings. We will see the ECLSS systems humming along, keeping the air fresh for months at a time. The sharp moon dust will be kept outside where it belongs. The astronauts will have enough room to exercise, do science, and even relax. It will be the first time humans are truly a multi-planet species. The scoreboard will show a permanent human presence on another world. SpaceX didn't just land a rocket, they made it routine. Over 200 landings while Boeing's Starliner hasn't flown crew and Blue Origin hasn't reached orbit. The impossible became infrastructure. Now Starship aims to do the same at 10x the scale, turning Mars from science fiction into engineering problem. The transformation of the moon from a distant rock into a second home is the greatest engineering victory of our time. It proves that with the right design and enough courage, there are no limits to where we can go. The next generation of explorers will look back at this moment as the start of everything. The impossible is now the routine, and the stars are finally within our reach.